Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome to EveryLibrary Live, and thank you for joining us for Audiobook Week 2025, a celebration of the art, craft, and culture of storytelling through sound. I am Gigi Howard from the award-winning podcast Drinks in the Library, where every week I invite a guest to spill the tea about their favorite book, and we pair it with a drink. All right, so I'm so glad to be back here with my friends, EveryLibrary for EveryLibrary Live. We are featuring conversations with best-selling authors, award-winning narrators, and the creative professionals behind your favorite audiobooks. From gripping thrillers and historical fiction to immersive audio-first productions, this festival is your front row seat to the voices that bring books to life. Whether you're a lifelong audiobook fan like me or just getting started, we're glad to have you here with us to explore how stories are made and why the format matters even more. Tonight, we are interviewing Dr. Mary Jumbelic, the author of Here Where Death Delights and the producer of the audiobook, Mary Catherine Jones. Hello to you both. All right. So, Mary Jumbelic is an author and former chief medical examiner from Onondaga County, New York. In her 25-year career, she has performed thousands of autopsies and helped to pass national safety policies for consumer products, preventing untimely deaths. You might have seen her as an expert witness on Dateline, 48 Hours, Discovery Channel, Law and Crime, and more. While retired from government work, Mary continues to consult on cases, pursuing her passion for writing by sharing her stories of experience both in and out of the morgue. She has been nominated for a Pushcart Prize, and her first book, Where Death Delights, has been featured in Times Square and is the recipient of the International Press Award and Awards. Her second book, Speak Her Name, is coming out on July 7th, which is so exciting. And I was hearing a little bit before that she's been working on the second book with Mary Catherine the last few days. Mary Catherine is the owner and executive producer at the Audiobook Experience LLC. She delights in working with authors to bring their stories into the world, either using their voices or finding the perfect narrator for their audiobook. Writers and publishers from across the United States put their trust in her to give their voice to their stories. So, thank you both for being here with us tonight. I'm so excited to hear about the work you do. And I think we're just going to have to start with you, Mary. I think we're introducing everyone to you and your work, what led you from um, being a forensic pathologist to now writing stories. How did that get started?
Well, first, thank you, Gigi, for having me here. It's very exciting to be on a show where everyone's interested in literature, how it came to be, what form it is in, audio or in print. And so I'm excited. Thank you. I began my career as a forensic pathologist, and back in the day, no one knew what that was. However, now it's a popular character in many true crime stories or on television shows, even reality TV. And when I finished working with the government, I was looking for something more to fill my time and passion, and writing came naturally to me because I've always loved it. I've kept journals my entire life since I was 13, and even academic papers and all the other writing I did, the journaling and the writing, the creative writing, were very important to me. So it became natural to reflect back on my life and my cases and to begin to write stories about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I just finished reading your first book, Here Where Death Delights, which absolutely compelling. I think anyone who's interested in the true crime genre, which is so popular right now, is just going to be blown away by that. And there's so many stories in it. And so I was all like, how are there still more stories for the second book, Speak Her Name?
Yes, and most writers, and so I consider myself in that group, look at life and all of their experiences, and they become tales and stories in our minds. And then the writer's challenge is to bring that experience to the reader. And so I find that I have had very compelling cases, I've had compelling experiences, and being able to then write about those so that the reader will enjoy it and gain a lesson or a feeling from what I've written is very important. But it was harder to say what stories to keep out than to try to think of stories to put in. There are that many in my head.
Okay. I mean, I was totally blown away by the book, and I think it's a good time, Mary Catherine, I kind of want to bring you in. Maybe we'll start off a little bit how you and Mary met each other and working on the first project.
So we were actually trying to remember how we first got connected, because this is the second book that we've done together, which is so wonderful. And we're pretty sure that Mary reached out to me from the Authors Guild, because I'm a member of the Authors Guild and love working with Authors Guild members. And as I recall, when she first reached out, she said, all right, so I want to do this audiobook and I want it to be in my voice. Is that a good idea? Is that a bad idea? What do you think? And so we had a long conversation, and I reassured her that particularly for works of memoir, thought leadership, that unless the author really, really doesn't want to, or has a speech impediment such, or accent where it would interfere with the listener's ability to understand, it's actually preferable for the author to be reading their own work. They're going to be the ones that are the most engaged with it. And so my job is to make sure that they do this fluidly and that they sound like themselves. I think one of the things I said was, my job is to make sure that you sound like yourself on your very best day. Nobody's going to know all the times that you stumble, or the times that, something falls, or, a plane goes overhead or something like that. That's my job, is to keep all of that out of the recording. So there's nothing but your voice that's going into your listeners' ears.
Yeah.
And so she said, great. When do we start?
Well, I bet a lot of authors out there are glad to hear you say that, because I know sometimes it's challenging after you write a book and you want to be the narrator to get picked for the project. So,
well, again, most of the folks that I work with are working, they're either publishing themselves, or they're working with a hybrid publisher or a small independent press, so that they retain that control. It's not the publisher's decision, it's their decision. And so I work with the author and with the publisher when that's appropriate to determine, does that make the most sense? Broadly speaking, if this were a work of fiction, particularly one with many characters, then I would probably be saying, I really think we want to lean towards looking at a professional narrator, because that's a different genre. That is not the same as a memoir.
Yeah, absolutely. Fantastic books. I'm very excited for book 2. I want to ask you both, Mary, I'm going to start with you. Let's pull some readers or listeners in. What is a story that from your writing that really stuck with you that you would be willing to share with us tonight?
Well, in both of my books, the way I start out is usually an impactful story. I do give a content warning, because my work deals with death, and it deals with death in all its forms. It can be gruesome, it can be gory, but I feel it's very important to shine a light on death, and I feel that death has a lot to teach us, thus the name here, Where Death Delights, because it's not the delight of joy, it's the delight of educating or awareness that I see with death. Speak Her Name, similarly, is not to forget those dead and to learn the lessons that they have to teach us, to remember her name and speak her name. Because my second book focuses in on violence against women. Now, you asked for a specific story, And I could share a story, just not reading it as I've been doing for the past 3 days in the audio experience, which has been wonderful. But the story that was the very first story I ever wrote and then shared publicly, had the nerve to share and then submit to a literary journal, was a story about a little boy who was killed by his father. And the mother was also killed in the same rampage. The little boy had the vein on the side of his neck cut when the father sliced his throat.
Yeah.
But not the artery. So it was a slow bleeding that happened. And it was apparent from the scene that he touched his neck and then he touched the walls as he was dying. And when I came into that scene and saw that, it struck me that the little hands with the bloody prints, it was so horrifying, and it reminded me of my finger paint hands that I had from my children in my office that I looked at every day. That was a sign of hope and life. And here he had died in such a horrific fashion. Mm-hmm. And so that story stayed with me for my whole career and was one of the first that I had to write. And when I first read it to my writing group, I couldn't get through it. I couldn't actually read it because I would cry every time. Mm-hmm. And I felt if it's that impactful for me in my career of having all these cases and it's still resonating like that, that this is something to share with people to understand the impact.
Yeah. And if I recall, that's the opening chapter of Here Where Death Delights. Yeah, it's heartbreaking. And I think a lot of your writing pulls together these stories, but also life at the same time. And, it's so compelling. It's like you already said so perfectly. So
thank you, Gigi.
Yeah. Mary Catherine, what's a favorite story of yours from her books?
Well, that one was actually the first one that comes to mind because it is so striking. And what I find really compelling about Mary's writing, and it translates very well into the audiobook, is the connection between, just as you were pointing out, Gigi, her stories and her own personal life at the same time. I mean, when often the stories that she writes about that involve children, they happen to be around the same age as one of her children. They involve the people that you come to know over the course of the two books. And so you get to know Mary as a person, as well as the different cases that she has been working on. There's a main case that sort of runs the thread of Speak Her Name, which I'm not going to go into because I feel like that's sort of the main meat of the story. But it's just that it's kind of a page turner. And, there's that main story interspersed with other stories from her past, from her life, from her childhood. And you see how it's all woven together. And there were definitely some where afterwards I just said, okay, let's just take a little break because I need to breathe. There's it's very, very powerful writing.
Yeah. And while we're still on the subject, I did want to ask Mary specifically, you do weave together these heartbreaking stories so well with life. And I'm guessing you have a very you have a different perspective on death than many people do. What would you like to say about that? Sorry.
No. Thank you for asking that question. I feel that in Western society, well, particularly American society, I can speak to that, we tend to keep death at a distance and try to make it pretty and close it off and not talk about it and not think about it. And I feel in other cultures and certainly in the past, death was a part of everyday life. You know, people, if they died, were then in their homes on a table for others to come in and see and say goodbye to. And I have always been faced with death through my career. But it started really before that, because my father died when I was 13. And that jolt in my universe, I think, propelled me into my career, although I didn't see the connection for decades, but it did. And I've always felt that death is right there. It's in the shadow. It's just right next to us.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been close to it myself with my health. My family has. My mother died in our home. And so I'm more willing to just look it in the face. And I think if we can do that, we actually can live a more fulfilling life.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. Mary Catherine, do you have anything to add on to that?
Well, I think it's very much what Mary was saying about that interweaving between life and death. And what I took away from this most recent book, Speak Her Name, which, as Mary was saying, really details the femicide and abuse and domestic abuse, and that line between abuse and death it's so thin. And what I think many people who suffer from domestic violence don't understand how close to death they are at those times. And so for me, coming from that book, that really drove that point home for me.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to book 2 and all the stories I'm sure you're going to weave together for us. Mary Catherine, I wanted to ask, how did you get started in audiobook production?
I love books and I love stories. And so one of my first jobs out of college really was working for a publishing company, and then I became their national sales manager and all of those things. And here in Vermont, it's a wonderful community, so you never really leave, even when you step away. And so after I had taken some time off and got my children to where they could survive on their own reasonably, I started getting involved with voiceovers, and so did a lot of recording of my own voice and a couple of audiobooks, as well as commercials and e-learning, that kind of thing. But what I really wanted to do was to do audiobooks with other people, but I didn't have the equipment, and I wasn't sure that I had the skills. I was lucky to get a job working for a local production company, working primarily with other talent to record jingles and other commercials and that kind of thing. And so over that time, I got really comfortable recording other people and also putting in music and getting good performances out of that. And so when the owner of that company said, I'm kind of done, I was able to buy his business, which meant that I got all of his equipment, and I was able to move that to my studio and expand it and start bringing people in here. And one of the first projects I did was recording a local author's audiobooks. And after the first one, he gave me, I think, 5 more, and I was on my way. So
Very cool. All right. What do you think, Mary Catherine, would people be most surprised to learn about is like the behind the scenes of audiobook creation that the layman does not know?
How much time it takes,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, Mary, would you agree with that? Yeah, it takes you some people really think, oh, okay, well, it takes 5 hours to listen to, so what, 6 hours to record? No. It takes a long time, because there are many times where you stumble, where the body noises get in the way, where you read your words and you're like, why did I write this? I can't say this. Or you say completely the wrong thing, and which is where I come in, because I say, oh, it's actually on the page. This is what it says. Let's go back. Let's do that again. So it takes some time, but I'm sure Mary can speak to that. I mean, what really is more surprising for her? That's what my takeaway would be.
Well, I think when I got into wanting to do the audiobook, Mary Catherine made me feel very comfortable. I felt she had the expertise and the professionalism, and the fact that it could be all done in one place. So I didn't have to go to a studio and then hire the production team and then do, the fact that you are the one-stop shop to do the audiobook was really important to me. And I was very nervous, but you made the whole experience pleasant, and I wouldn't call it easy, but as pleasant and easy as it could be given, the task at hand. And it couldn't have been nicer. And I was still nervous about what the end result would be. And when I heard it, I wanted to weep for joy because you just captured it. You got it perfect. And so that's why I'm back.
That's awesome. That's beautiful. That's everything. I'm so here for it. All right, let's talk a little bit about Speak Her Name, which y'all are in the midst or just wrapping up recording. What should listeners be looking forward to with this audiobook experience coming pretty soon?
Well, I think we've said that it has a content warning about the difficult nature of the cases and the stories, but I think in the end, it's a hopeful tale that in the end, we do survive. We do get past it. The women are giving us information and lessons, and justice is sought, and we can change and we can effect change. And so that's really why I've written it, and hope that that's helpful to readers.
One of the things that I was struck by is that you start, again, bringing in stories from your own life, Mary, but really setting the scene for what was society like, back. Well, first of all, there was a time where it wasn't against the law to beat your spouse. But then even when that became illegal, how it was still considered, well, that's a family matter, and it was not talked about, and it still happened. And so to see that progress through the 60s and the 70s and the 80s, and how now it's still very much a problem, but there's so many more resources for people to access. And so that's part of the hope that I took from it.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, well, I'm so excited for it. And I guess I also was curious for both of you, since Here Where Death Delights came out, like, what kind of responses have you both heard from that?
Well, speaking to the audiobook in particular, I've had many readers say to me, oh, I'm going to listen to it now. They've already read it. They know the stories, but they wanted to hear it in my voice.
Yes.
And that was so compelling to me that it was exciting that not only do they already know everything, but they still wanted to hear it. So that speaks to the power of audio. That speaks to the power of the narrator of the memoir being the speaker, being the person recording the words. People are touched by that. And I've had a lot of people want to go back to the audio, when it was done.
Yes. I mean, for me, I know that on my website, I have little clips from all the books that I've done. And I think I'm over 100 at this point, which is very nice for me. And I know that yours is listened to quite a bit. So, I mean, I think that what draws people in, quite honestly, is the cover. That's a book is judged by its cover. And so people are like, what is this?
Yes, and I have to shout out to my son, Joshua Jumbles, the artist, because he did the cover of the first book and he did the cover of the new book, Speak Her Name. And I felt very good as a self-published writer that I could choose my cover, that I could decide how it would look, and and let the artist have some creativity to really frame my title and my words. And I'm very happy, to hear that, Mary Catherine.
And speaking to that as well, I mean, just the growth where we are with audiobooks right now. What are you both seeing as far as audiobooks versus traditional print or ebooks?
Well, I can tell you, just as far as the market goes, it's had double-digit growth for the last, I believe it's 10 or maybe 11 years, and it's projected to continue growing at that pace. I think I believe that the market worldwide is going to grow to 26 billion by 2026.
Wow.
It's an almost exponential growth as more and more people want more and more books, and they want them the way they want them. And there is a substantial portion of the reading population that reads with their ears. And so they want their books with their ears. We also know that print books they dominate the market, but this last year, audiobooks actually overtook ebooks as for market share. And so we're seeing that, continue to grow. I don't think ebooks are going to go away. They're very convenient. I love my portable library. But the audiobooks, people love engaging with audiobooks, and that they're wonderful for when you're traveling or doing groceries or ironing,
100%. Yeah. Mary, what about you?
I am able to read so much more because of the audiobook experience. I can, read 3 times as much as I would read if I only could hold a book in my hand. I think my print has sold better. My hardcover is better than my ebook, is better than my audio, but I am now more concurrently releasing the audio with the print book. So we'll see where that goes.
Yeah, I think it's great. I mean, yeah, so exciting, so much coming up. And I want to ask, what's coming up next for both of you? What are you working on? What's exciting coming down the pike?
Well, let's see. I have an author who will be here coming in from California that will be recording with me next month. And in the meantime, I have 2 fantasy books that will be kicking off, and I've cast for both of those, as well as another fiction book that I've cast for. So those productions are gearing up and will be starting. And I am hoping that I will be working on a romance starting next week, but we'll see. The auditions are out, and the author needs to decide who she wants her narrator to be. So I have a full summer.
That's great. Well, my new book, Speak Her Name, I will be promoting that for the next 6 months with lectures at libraries and book clubs and book signings at bookstores and all of that. But I can't stop the little muse in my head. And so I've already got ideas for my 3rd book. I didn't ask for them, but they just come unbidden into my mind. So.
Well, I'm so excited for that, and loved having time with y'all both tonight. Cannot say enough about Here Where Death Delights, specifically the audiobook, and also very much looking forward to Speak Her Name, which is coming out July 7th, correct?
Yes.
Yes. So, and definitely looking forward to hearing your voice on that, Mary. So absolutely lovely. All right. And I want to thank you both. And I want to thank all of our viewers tonight for tuning in to this session of Audiobook Week on EveryLibrary Live. We hope you enjoyed this behind the scenes look at the people like sitting right here with me and the processes that make audiobooks such a powerful part of today's reading culture. So also, if you missed any sessions or if you want to revisit your favorites, you can catch them all on EveryLibrary's Facebook and YouTube on demand anytime. Stay with us all week and keep listening and keep supporting your local library. Thank you so much. It was lovely to be with y'all tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.